Yes, you can.
But you
I've
end up,
tried it.
you have
But you
tried it?
don't. Yeah, of course.
Did you just get a little bit shaky and a normal heart rate? What happened?
Uh,
Let's talk about the ancillaries. So what are your go-tos, Derek?
Well, they've changed, and I think it would depend on how aggressive I was going. So, like for me, my ancillaries are basic like health supplements with a minor dose of telmisartan, pretty much. But if I was actually like the hypothetical scenario I'd like to propose is if somebody was a full-blown bodybuilder blasting, like what would be the adequate ancillaries? So for me, I would think an ARB, depending on how high your blood pressure is, of course, it wouldn't just be defaulted to telmisartan like everyone seems to think is the best choice.
Should we take a detour there for a second and discuss that?
Yeah.
So just a very quick summary. There's 4 ARBs people should look at. One is telmisartan, which has a dual effect of being a PPA receptor gamma agonist, which means it helps you put fat in adipocytes as opposed to instead of your blood and in visceral fat and so on. So telmisartan has other benefit, but it's actually quite weak. If you have hypertension, serious hypertension, it's not going to be very effective. Valsartan is the most selective. It's like the surgical approach, but again, not the strongest at the higher doses. Irbesartan has some unusual studies that showed may be helpful in chronic kidney disease at the later stages, and it has studies showing the opposite as well. There's only a couple of studies that show that. So irbesartan, some people, and that last one is azilsartan, the most powerful at the max dose, which is what Fuad is on, actually, for example. You mentioned.
So, like hypothetically, if you had like a start would be probably telmisartan or valsartan, you would think, for the majority of people.
Yeah.
Like if you were just assessing your response, and then if for some reason it was uncontrollable at that point, you might upgrade to the azilsartan.
Yeah, I think that if someone wants to be very efficient, the most efficient way would be to do that. But if somebody actually has hypertension, like 150 over 90 or 100, 160, you
Then
probably
just get it down as fast as possible.
You'll probably need to go to valsartan anyway, and you may need more than that.
Okay. One thing I want to bring up that's interesting too is I think a lot of people, I use telmisartan, so I'm not shitting on it, but the actual performance enhancing properties that come from PPAR delta agonism are quite
let's
weak.
Discuss this.
Whereas like WADA actually assessed how potent it is at enhancing endurance or any kind of performance metrics, and they found after putting it on a watch list that it was so not useful that they actually pulled it off of their thing that they thought might become a PED. So they don't even think it's worth using for the purpose that people think they're getting out of it.
So anything that agonizes the PPR gamma or PPR delta receptor that fully will somewhat agonize the other one. So there are people that have been commenting on my videos saying telmisartan is very good for endurance or something like that. And I'm like, what are they thinking? Then I discovered that there were some early papers in the history of telmisartan research that showed it had mild agonist properties on the delta or beta receptor. And then there are later papers that hypothesize that some results may be due to beta or delta receptor agonism. It's very weak there. Cardarine is literally the classic academic agonist of that receptor.
Right.
What are you saying, Steve?
But it's the same as with Nebivolol. I mean, it's a beta-1 receptor blocker. And then it has a little bit of beta-3 receptor agonism. So, you get a little bit of a brown fatty acid or brown fat activation and a little bit of blood pressure reduction through the second pathway besides lowering your heart rate and not get so much pressure on your aorta. So it's a secondary benefit, but it's not, that's not the reason why we take it for a performance enhancing drug. Like personally, I like Nebivolol as a method to get your blood pressure under control because it also lowers your heart rate, and it was not shown to have, deleterious effects to your workout capacity.
So wait, let's let you continue. I think probably the next thing you were going to mention, Derek, was beta blockers, right?
Yeah, but this could be like 2 birds, 1 stone. So we're talking about ancillaries, and I think the next appropriate thing after ARB would probably be talking about beta blockade, which is also a topic in itself that it might just be an overlapping. I'll have 2 clips, one for beta blockers, and then the portion of it will still be in the ancillaries part. But the thing, so we have a little bit of a I don't think we have like vastly differing opinions on what the best approach is, but I thought this would be good to kind of get the three of us on it. But so as it stands, like for me, I like the approach of Nebivolol based on its beta 1 selectivity up until 10 milligrams though. And then after that, it starts to be kind of broad spectrum, which is, you know, less favorable, but at least up until that dose, it's quite, you know, good at what it does, and it's quite selective and compounded on top of your ARB. I don't know how much more you'd really need. So I don't know if, like, to me, it seems like the standout option as far as bodybuilders who need their exercise performance to be on point. But then I know Leo has a differing opinion, but it's more so from the longevity perspective, I guess, on that. And we could talk about that first in terms of beta blockers and which ones are the best and why and which situations. And then after that, I'd like to bring up beta 2 agonism, like where the actual beta receptors are located, because I think there's a huge misconception of like where beta 2 receptors are and how much that interplays with cardiac issues. Like Clenbuterol is often stated to be like the most cardiotoxic thing you can possibly use. But when you actually look at the location of beta receptors, it's like how much does that actually play into it when Nebivolol, for example, is so effective, but it's only be through its interaction of beta 1.
So maybe we take a step back for the audience and say, what is a beta blocker? A beta blocker is a molecule that blocks the receptor of adrenaline called the beta receptor. There's the alpha and beta receptors. And Steve mentioned earlier that there's 3 beta receptors. And there's a drug we're talking about here called Nebivolol, which actually agonizes the 3rd receptor as opposed to antagonizes it. Now, by the way,
the only compound that is selective. So you have a selective beta receptor modulator. So it's Nebivolol is probably the only one that falls into that category, just like SARMs or SERMs are. So you have a Supraphysiological, you know, it's horrible to pronounce, but it's the only selective beta receptor modulator that is out there. As far as I know.
First thing we should determine is that what you mentioned about the 3rd beta receptor and involvement in the browning of fat. Recent research has actually shown that it seems to be unfortunately, the beta receptor 1 that is most involved in, which is unfortunate because, the beta receptor 3, the beta receptor 1 is very involved in the heart rate, very much so. And the beta receptor 3 is involved in weird things like urination. Stuff like that. So we were hoping, you could agonize that and have some fun and get brown fat, which, by the way, I have a lot of brown fat, interestingly. But so anyway, so what about Nebivolol? Why do I not like it? There's 2 reasons. Derek mentioned the health effect, which is increasing nitric oxide. So the reason Nebivolol has a few advantages, or maybe we should take a step back. What are the difference between different beta blockers? One is, does it pass into the brain? Because noradrenaline is very important in your brain. Does it pass into your brain? How selective is it of the beta 1 versus beta 2 versus beta 3 receptors, which Nebivolol is the most selective of all, I think, of the beta 1 over.
Like propranolol attaches to all 3.
Propranolol is maybe the least selective, and Nebivolol is by far the most selective, I think. So those are some things. Now, the Nebivolol has an added effect, which is it increases nitric oxide synthase, meaning it dilates blood vessels. And it's thought because of this action when you actually exercise, Nebivolol doesn't reduce your heart rate as much as, and maybe because of its selectivity also, as much as other molecules. Other molecules, if you take these beta blockers at a time that it's active and go work out, you won't be able to get your max heart rate, which is maybe one reason why my heart rate variability was bad when Derek and I looked at it.
And the weird thing is it also reduces exercise performance, which is something I didn't notice when I was running 5 milligrams of Nebivolol, and neither did all of my clients that are using it right now. But that's not in combination with telmisartan. So that's Nebivolol by itself. And you got to keep in mind that myself and many of my athletes also use Cialis, 5 milligrams per day, which has some secondary effects of increasing nitric oxide content in the blood, as well as lowering blood pressure and some secondary effects regarding workout performance. It's mostly pumps and that kind of stuff. And we're all managing our electrolytes, and I think that's tremendously overlooked in blood pressure management. And I made several videos about it, but it doesn't get much traction because taking medication is, of course, way easier than micromanaging your sodium, potassium,
obviously
calcium,
it should
phosphorus,
be,
etc.
it should be prefaced that we would all advise having a dialed-in diet before you just obviously the pharmacology helps, but obviously get your potassium in, get your calcium, etc. Don't just crank the fucking salt and that's it.
Well, because estradiol also goes through the renin and vasopressin pathways, and too high estrogen or too low estrogen is also deleterious for your blood work. So there's many things that you have to look at before you add in the nebivolol, of course. And
I use estradiol as a PED. So for me, I like estradiol being high. I'd rather take a little bit of a vasodilator and have estradiol a bit higher because it's an antioxidant I know enters my brain very well. So it has some. But so let's talk about some specifics. So if you take nebivolol 24 hours before a workout, you're still going to have it in your system, but because of the nitric oxide effects, your heart rate will be able to get a bit higher than if you're using a beta blocker that was not increasing nitric oxide synthase. The way I would do it personally, because my concern is really what these androgens are also doing in the brain in the long term. Having high noradrenaline signaling in the brain will basically give you a mild version of PTSD in the long term. So my view of it is propranolol is so short acting. And also, by the way, as a side note, I'd like my heart rate to vary. So propranolol is so short acting that I would take it like once right after my workout. After I did the workout, and it's only like 8 hours or exactly. So then the next day my heart rate is fine, but I really dampened my adrenergic signaling for a portion of the day. That neurons fire together, wire together. When you block that firing of the neurons, they eventually get weaker. That's why I use propranolol personally, is it passes the blood-brain barrier very well, and it's not very selective between alpha and beta adrenergic receptors, which I don't want it to be selective, for my purposes. But it'll cause, like, if you're going to use something and you want it to be there all day, nebivolol is the better option, obviously.
So what do you use personally? Like, you use propranolol, but like how much and how many times a day?
I use 40 milligrams once upon waking only.
Okay.
Yeah, and the reason I do that is so that it blunts the max sympathetic nervous drive stimulation, which is 2 to 3 hours.
So is your cortisol like high-ish when you wake up then for you to want to blunt that?
No, it isn't.
Like you said, you're like a pretty like sympathetically driven individual, right? So like I would think propranolol right when you wake up would be like the worst time to take it when you're trying to get going.
Yeah, right. So I'm not being clear. Yeah, so I'm very adrenergically driven naturally. So I'm very, I'm prone to becoming in adrenergic states and so on. So for me, it's a specific thing I do for my own biology because I don't want my adrenergic system to become stronger over the years like it did before. So I'm just trying to lower the stress at the peak hours of the day.
Okay. Makes sense.
Because it affects, you're blocking that adrenaline in the brain. And also I'm using it to make some drugs more specific. Like all of the drugs that manipulate dopamine also manipulate adrenaline. So often I'm using these things to cut out the adrenergic effect from the drug.
So it's an ancillary to some of the other. Is there nootropic stuff like modafinil, for example, which is known to increase dopamine concentrations a little bit?
Exactly. Modafinil, it would harm a lot because modafinil relies a little bit more on noradrenaline than amphetamines. But so what was your question or your point, Derek, about the clenbuterol?
Oh, yeah. So clenbuterol acts as a beta-2 agonist rather than beta-1. And often the concern surrounding it is how cardiotoxic it is. It's supposed to be, the worst thing for your heart, can cause necrosis of the heart tissue, blah, blah, blah. But when it's a beta-2 agonist and it mostly interacts with the lungs, as far as I know, is that an overstated concern? Or is that because like the actual location of the beta receptors, is it that problematic with your heart when it's like a beta-2 agonist, or what do you think on that?
So I think what Derek's trying to tell the audience is that the beta-1 receptor is the most involved in the heart rate, it seems. So when you're getting
beta-2 in the lungs,
and
beta-3, whatever you said earlier.
Beta-2 are also a lot in the periphery, which is why the clenbuterol will cause more shaking than a beta-1 agonist, right?
Yeah, that's a very potent stimulant of the central nervous system, and it actually increases workout capacity and contractile capacity during the workout.
Yeah, and it does that, by the way. One of the ways that that testosterone and other hormones increase your strength acutely is via adrenaline, just like clenbuterol is doing. So you guys know that the salmeterol is more specific to the beta-2 receptors. Do you guys know that?
Salmeterol.
Yeah, I saw your video on it a while ago.
That one. The sal. There's only one.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so that one's more specific. The thing is, if you guys take Clen, you'll notice your resting heart rate increase.
Oh yeah, definitely. So, that in itself obviously is problematic, but I was wondering.
The other side of it,
agonize, you can block the beta-1 with nebivolol. This is, of course, what a lot of people are going to ask in the comment section. Can I block the beta-1 with nebivolol and take clenbuterol at the same time to activate the beta-2? And yes, you can.
But you
I've
end up.
tried it.
You have
But you're
tried it?
done. Yeah, of course.
Did you just get a little bit shaky and a normal heart rate? What happened?
Yeah, your heart rate stays pretty good. Your blood pressure still goes down, and you still get some fat loss, but not as much fat loss as you would normally expect, because the majority of the fat loss from Clenbuterol comes from the elevated heart rate, and of course the heart works on fatty acids, so you got it partially releases fatty acids into the bloodstream through lipolysis, and then it stimulates the heart rate. Whether that's a secondary effect from lowering your blood pressure, and then the heart rate increases to keep the blood volume, etc., going,
Yes.
or it's by actually activating the beta 2 receptors on the heart. So that's where most of the fat loss comes from at rest. And of course, if you do increase your caloric expenditure and do some cardio or activity, that fat loss is increased. Now you add Nebivolol into that mix to keep your heart rate down, you notice that the fat loss is not that dramatic anymore.
But the thing is, the adrenergic stimulation does more than just increase the heart rate. So, for example, Dan Duchesne thought originally, according to John Romano, told me that the shaking itself was causing the fat loss. But if you look at the adrenergic, if you look at the studies on Clenbuterol, you find that there's a change in gene transcription, which alters their metabolic activity. So I think that plays a role in it as well. Yeah. Basically, the way I think of it is this: if you're driving a Ferrari and you're always careful with it, it'll last you a long time. But if you're driving 200, if you're on the Autobahn but taking turns right and left, on the Autobahn but taking turns constantly, you're going to wear some stuff out. And that's the way that stress kills. And stress kills via two hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. Those are the only two root ones you need to think about. So the way I see it is if you're running your car on the full gas constantly, things are going to wear out and break down, like the heart necrosis that you're talking about, which is found among ultra marathon runners and stuff like that. It's because they push the heart to the limit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's of course Clenbuterol is what, 36-hour half-life, so it's it compounds and it just keeps going.
Exactly.
That's why I prefer not to take it anymore. For fat loss, I would consider a GW1516 or the one that's a little bit more selective that just got released, GW1517.
Is it more selective? Is that what it is?
I know I've been doing my research for that fat loss pharmacology ebook, but I didn't get that far yet. So there's an SR 9009, 90011.
9011, and there's a third one also, by the way. There's a third one.
Oh, really?
More interesting.
Yeah. So I have a lot of reading to do, but there's a GW variant and SR variants, which apparently are a little bit more selective, but there's not so much data on it yet.
The SR 9011 is not more selective. There's a third one that may have. It's not as well studied. The GW was originally created along with the original GW, so I'm not sure if it's more selective or not. It may just be.
To me, it seems probably like a research chemical company way to sell something, whereas the other one it's not targeted. Yeah, that's what I would think.
Wouldn't surprise me, considering the underground labs. It's everything's a sales pitch nowadays,
Yeah.
So Derek began with the ARB and the beta blocker. What else would you include on that list?
Yeah, so I kind of obviously a lot of the supplementation in terms of lipid modulation and stuff like that. I was looking more seriously at some of your, I don't know how realistic it is to tell somebody to get a PCSK9 inhibitor. But
I've been doing it actively on an individual basis, trying to.
What would you, if you were to name your ancillaries, what would you say? Ezetimibe, PCSK9 inhibitor, anything else?
The way I think of it, realistically, say I was 3 years ago and I didn't know much about this stuff and I didn't care that much about my health, but I want to do something. Ezetimibe you can find on All Day Chemist. It's very innocuous. It rarely has side effects in people. It basically prevents you from absorbing a lot of the dietary cholesterol, so you can eat more eggs and more liver or whatever. And it also inhibits your liver from being able to pull out cholesterol from bile fluid. That one's very innocuous and easy to get started on. There could be no excuse for not using it. It's only going to lower your cholesterol, though, by about 10 to 20%. If you have over 150 LDL cholesterol, something like that, you're going to need either a statin, bempedoic acid, or a PCSK9 inhibitor like Repatha. But you're probably not going to get covered by insurance for all of them unless you start with a statin. So I have a client, for example, that is on a statin. that has been on a statin for a while has not been taking it, and we've decided for him to continue doing that for a little bit. He's going on a cycle, then he's going to visit his doctor and say, I've been on the statin 6 months, my LDL is getting worse, to get on Repatha. Obviously this is not under my, not direct advice, so it's not insurance fraud, but basically people are trying to get Repatha because it has less side effects than statins, and bempedoic acid is more selective to the liver than statins. And the risk with statins mainly is brain fog and muscle weakness and diabetes, being that women get, like, a fourth of women get diabetes from it. So it's pretty serious. But
my wife's been using ezetimibe.
Yeah.
Because 2 months ago we did our blood work and it was pretty bad. I just recorded that Turksterone video, by the way, so that will go up soon. So her total
do that topic next after we
we'll go over it. So her total LDL went from 200 to 110 over the course of 2 months after adding the ezetimibe, and citrus bergamot. So that's there's a little bit of cross stuff,
So
Gorilla Mind, citrus bergamot.
Yes, of course.
Oh, perfect.
Yes, of course.
In terms of a statin, I would, as I mentioned before, pitavastatin is the one least associated, I think, with diabetes. Rosuvastatin doesn't pass the blood-brain barrier, so should cause less brain fog. I think that citrus bergamot, and if you use niacin, should be added after you've managed the LDL with pharmacologic means that are associated with extending life. So statins are shown to extend life. Niacin will raise your HDL cholesterol, but not extend your life. So we don't have long-term studies on citrus bergamot, which I take as well, and I also use your brand, Derek, because you sent it to me.
Oh, yeah, awesome.
I need to check it out actually, but I've been using it. So anyway, I use citrus bergamot, but after you know that you're dealing with the problem, the root problem, which you can only resolve with the medications we just mentioned, really.
And it's a marginal increase, but it's a noticeable increase. And if you're on like hormone replacement, it's a very suitable.
Yes.
Like not everybody needs an ezetimibe or a statin or red yeast rice, for example. I'd rather like supplemental citrus bergamot. It can raise HDL maybe 10, 20 points.
Well,
if we're doing that consecutively with dietary changes, cardio, and everything else under the sun, that could potentially, promote a favorable lipid ratio. And then, when you're on the heavy PEDs, like the Winstrol, Trenbolone, higher dosages, then ezetimibe might be beneficial. Or you have genetic predispositions, like my wife has, for high total cholesterol levels or high LDL levels. That's in her family. So she would always need to take some proactive approach, whereas my lipid levels are only terrible when I run Winstrol. So even on a gram of test, my lipids are fine.
Yeah. You say they're fine, but let's remind the audience that above 75 nanograms per deciliter of LDL cholesterol has been associated with the development of atherosclerotic plaque.
Yeah,
probably, I would say 75% of the people watching this have a LDL cholesterol level higher than that. So you probably you're developing plaque determined by your inflammatory system, how inflamed your body is, and determined
calcium.
by calcium, other things like that. So you guys didn't mention this, but I would consider HCG an immediate ancillary. We've talked about this last discussion. Steve and I talked about it, but I would always include that in my list. And then,
so let me interject based on the question we had on Signal. I have no fibrosis in my testicles.
Oh yeah. So listen, how do you know?
No fibrosis. So it's good. I did the testicular ultrasound and unremarkable. And I asked them specifically, look for fibrosis, cirrhosis, etc. Just put it really under the microscope. I didn't use HCG only once per year, like a pretty hefty dose to see where my testosterone production would be. But I didn't use HCG besides my first cycle where I thought it was beneficial. So that's just anecdotal evidence.
No, but
there's no sclerosis in my testicles.
No, but you mentioned let's mention the audience. You mentioned last time that you don't have hypogonadism. You don't have smaller testes in the first place, which I think would be. I don't think you can develop scar tissue unless you have those smaller testes in the first place.
Right. Yeah. So right. So I don't lose much. I don't lose any fertility or any noticeable loss of fertility or testicular atrophy on cycle. Unless I run Trenbolone, and then of course, but that's been before my marriage.
So one thing that I think HCG maybe has viability in not only that if you obviously if you wanted to play it safe, you would do it for that, but in addition to upregulating steroidogenic acute regulatory protein to make sure that everything is going through steroidogenesis correctly while on cycle to kind of like backfill certain pathways that are downregulated and also like utilize cholesterol properly, which otherwise may be significantly elevated in androgen users. So I don't know, you could like theoretically lower your test-based dose and then make up for that with the disparity of some HCG to make sure all those processes are backfilled, improve your health, improve your, you know, HDL levels, probably with less androgen and more HCG seems to be more favorable on HDL and SHBG levels and whatnot. And yeah, like it might have some viability in that way
Yeah,
too.
libido is generally a lot better on ACG, you know, because the neurosteroids are being produced in the adrenal glands. You get, you know, much more favorable DHEA, DHEA sulfate, pregabalin sulfate levels. So you don't have to supplement those in. Like there's like
We can
different
take a
thoughts
case study
here.
though. Specifically, progesterone in the male body is mainly produced in the testes, and once you turn the testes production off, which is not off if you don't have hypogonadism, right?
Yeah.
So you have to have some hypogonadism, but when you do that, you're now injecting testosterone. You don't have progesterone. Progesterone is extremely important for myelination of axons in the brain. So that the disease that is related to low myelination is called ALS, what Stephen Hawking had. So you don't want to be on 10 years with low progesterone. You want to always limit dysfunction in the body to as small a place as possible.
Like it almost seems easier to me to implement HCG than to try and worry about manually supplementing every single thing that you otherwise wouldn't get. And it's an endogenous process too. And you don't have to worry about how it's regulated because you know your body is going to, well, pending you don't over abuse the HCG, you will have a regulated process in all of the different areas of the steroidogenesis cascade rather than hitting a fuck ton of DHEA, it all getting sulfated, a fuck ton of pregnenolone, it all getting sulfated and not going down the way you want it to go and all the stuff like that. So I think that's definitely a strong argument for you potentially every test base having a bit of HCG in that test base equation.
So, by the way, nobody online has ever discussed this idea of DHEA and pregnenolone all being sulfated. So this is a cool discussion.
No, I mentioned it in the video that, you know, at one point, like some of it will be sulfated through the steroid sulfate.
Well, I mean, us three are the first people on YouTube who ever talked about it.
Like often when you supplement it, you just see, you don't actually see an improvement in testosterone levels or any of the downstream things that you want to get out of it. You just get DHES that goes through the fucking roof.
Yes, which is useful for cognition.
Once the sulfate levels are at the top of the reference range, you see that free DHEA and free pregnenolone also pretty close to the top of the reference range, and that's where most of the benefits come from. But you know, I think we have to differentiate a little bit here between ACG on a true hormone replacement therapy protocol and ACG on supraphysiologic cycle with, you know, all these androgenic compounds, in which case it usually doesn't work anymore. And you still see testicular atrophy and you know, reduced semen volume and you know, bottomed out DHEA and pregnenolone levels.
Is that only on like 19 Nors though, or is that even if you were on like 1,000 mgs of test only plus
the problem? I have a lot of clients, right? And I'm the most extensive with my blood work. I can do it every week if I wanted to, right? I do it every month, basically, in general. So my clients that are running 1,000 milligrams of test, they're not that diligent with their blood work. So I don't have so much data to pull from. And of course, it's all anecdotal evidence anyway. So some guys are running ACG, and even at a conservative dose of like 150 to 200 units, maybe 250 units 3 times a week, after a while they notice testicular atrophy, but they don't notice that when they're on, you know, a true cruise, not a true cruise for bodybuilders, you know, 250 milligrams a test, at like 150 tests, 200 tests at maximum, then they don't notice testicular atrophy. So I think at one point, the amount of androgens in your system will simply override ACG, and then a lot of people will say, hey,
estradiol and progesterone. Remember?
Yeah, that also, yes, of course, that also. So
Derek, last time Vigorous Steve and I theorized that the reason that Trenbolone and Deca may be doing this more than other things is because they agonize the progesterone receptor. So we're getting both estradiol high from the testosterone, and then you're getting a little bit of progesterone signaling. So they
inherently activate estrogen receptors on their own, which may have negative feedback too.
But Steve forgot the conclusion of our call, which was that you should use HCG, and the reason why is because the original theory for not using it was because we thought the LH receptor would downregulate. There's no evidence of that. Number one. Number two, you can always judge how much HCG to use by doing it before your cycle, so you know how high your testosterone goes. So it's within a normal range, and then you know that's not harmful for me. I'll keep it throughout the cycle. It may help a little bit, but at least, you know, when I use Trenbolone at high doses and other drugs, like real drugs from when I was in Dubai, and I used HCG, I didn't get hypogonadism.
Real drugs?
Yeah, no, I mean like not American drugs, because the American drugs are, you know, you can never trust.
We're talking in the pharmaceutical or the recreational range?
Pharmaceutical, no, I'm talking pharmaceutical. You can get hypogonadism from recreational stuff too. That's
absolutely.
True.
I've seen it. I'm from Holland, man. It's I've seen a lot.
You've seen it on yourself. I've seen it.
No, not on myself. No. But
I'm
I've
Dutch.
seen it around for a lot of these guys that would go party all the time. You know, they would end up like
yeah, it's true.
the guys that Derek makes videos about. You know, 21 years old and 21 nanograms per deciliter.
That's true. You know, this can even happen with marijuana. It can.
Yeah, well, the prolactin goes up, you know, for recreational marijuana use, and I noticed that myself. That your sex drive takes a beating.
Huge.
You know, yeah, your prolactin levels go sky high, and I've heard it from so many guys. You know, and whenever I see the prolactin levels high on a client's blood work for a 1-hour consultation or clients, I said, hey, be honest, kratom or marijuana?
Oh yeah,
it's usually one or the other. You know.
I floated the baby name idea of Mary Jane to my wife yesterday. She was not very happy. You know why I'm doing this now? I had so many name ideas that I've given, and she just rejects all of them, just flat out, not even a thought about it. So now I'm just throwing bad names at her so that she can start to, you know, weigh them more carefully.
Like the lottery, you know, I just get like a board with all.
They're gonna keep getting worse until she starts being
magnets. Flip it, you know.
All right, what's the last thing we wanted to talk about? Wait, we didn't go through all that.
Ancillaries.
Oh, wait, I just want to mention.
We're supposed to do 5 to 10 minute videos, but this is.
Yeah, this is
this is part of the podcast, so it doesn't matter. It's fine.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
But wait, before we finish, I just want to mention, if it was me, I would always have an SSRI when I was on steroids, because the effects on the brain, there are two things. One is excitatory, too much excitation in the brain that can cause neuronal loss. That's one thing. But the second thing is you see across the studies a downregulation of serotonergic receptors. And we know that with women, they have more serotonergic activity than men. Estradiol is very connected to it. It seems that a damage of the serotonergic system is inherent when you use high dose androgens. So personally, I would keep an SSRI there, both to raise the serotonin level without raising it systemically, so I don't get risk of liver cancer and stuff like that, but also to increase the plasticity of the brain and increase neurogenesis, increase some killing neurons. I don't want to be more likely to get dementia.
Right.
Be interested to see what your comparison would be if you did, like, I'm not suggesting you do this, but if you were to theoretically use Kana in place of an SSRI as kind of like a makeshift natural approach. Although I agree that often pharmaceutical intervention is far more logical because it's actually targeted and it has clinical trials backing it and whatnot. But I think it seems pretty good.
Might be the best choice, actually. It might be the best choice because there are a lot of phytochemicals that are associated with neurogenesis, or that their consumption is associated with neurogenesis, but they're not that significant. In terms of drugs, you really have three options. One is an SSRI or SNRI. One is lithium, which you definitely don't want to take if you're a bodybuilder, because lithium causes kidney toxicity and kidney damage. And the third option you have is Cerebrolysin. Oh, my battery pack has changed. Whatever. Anyway, so I've lost signal now.
But the secretary is getting busy.
Yeah. So the third option you have is Cerebrolysin. Cerebrolysin are pig neurotrophic factors. They have them on Cosmic Nootropic. I think Amino Asylum will get them soon. I told them they should get them.
Okay.
These things
are
are
any immune system response from porcine, because
not in my experience.
Okay.
Yeah, porcine is exactly the word they use. Very interesting.
Porcine insulin, it led to many insulin immuno problems. So that's why I'm a little bit worried with those pig peptides.
Yeah.
But if there's no,
Did you know an interesting thing about porcine and pork? They're French, but pig is English. And then beef and bovine are French, but cow is English. You know why this is?
It's very confusing. No. I don't know. Wherever the research is being done, like when I use collagen supplements, it says hydrolyzed bovine hide. And then you think, oh, that's very special, but it's actually just leftover from the cow. Just like whey protein is leftover from cheese manufacturing. So we're all taking these protein powders that are just byproducts of, you know, whatever they're trying to make.
There were Norman French rulers of England since the Battle of Hastings in 1066 or 1033 that ruled England in French for 400 years. So the higher class words like foods, like certain foods that would be more available, like meats to the rulers, would be known in their French words. Anyway, so about cerebrolysin, very effective. So it's thought that a lot of the antidepressant and anxiolytic effects of antidepressants come from their increase of neurogenesis and neuroplasticity and their reduction of inflammation in the nervous system. Cerebrolysin seems to do this very effectively. I mean, it hasn't been studied in research much except for right after traumatic brain injury, but I've been using it myself personally. My clients use it, and they've noticed antidepressant effects, anxiolytic effects. And one guy, even against my advice, I mean, I did not advise him to do this, but like 2 weeks ago or 1 week ago and a half, guy messaged me, who's a good friend, repeated consultation client. He injected 50 milliliters of cerebrolysin in one night. Usually the recommendation for myself is 1 to 2 milliliters, you know, so 1 milliliter twice a week, something like that. This guy injected 50. He's done ibogaine before. He said it's almost the exact same experience as doing ibogaine, confirming my original suspicion that most of ibogaine's effects are even on the opioid withdrawal. He didn't have opioid withdrawal because of the cerebrolysin. Most of the effects are actually due to the neurogenesis and neuroplasticity.
Wow.
So this is like gold. If I had this, the problem is this: if you're a bodybuilder with all these upregulated growth pathways, and then you add in the brain growth pathways, you may be predisposed to some brain cancers and develop a brain cancer. So that's the only concern.
That's the annoying thing, how it's like everything that helps also fucks up cancer, or something that kills cancer does the opposite for cardiovascular
it's either your brain, your brain and your heart, or cancer.
Yeah, it's like, which one do you want to die from? Like,
I think it's a huge trade-off with biohacking and bodybuilding and everything else that we're doing here to improve our quality of life. I think there's always a trade-off at one point anyway, you know, and that's why you always have to, you know, make this calculated assessment of what do I want right now and what do I want to keep a part of myself, you know, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years.
Yeah, it's weird. It's almost like biology's way of telling you you're supposed to do nothing and just like leave your body alone, because it's like, oh, you try and improve this, I'll fuck this up. Oh, you try and improve that, I'll screw up this other thing.
It's same as with the super high natural testosterone levels of like 1,000 to 1,100 nanograms per deciliter. Their sex hormone binding globulin is sky high, so it's like a little, you know, FU from nature said you have this high test, but you don't get to have super high sex drive.
Well, that's
what's crazy is I met a guy who's like a very successful entrepreneur, multimillionaire guy, and he wanted me to look at his blood work. And he's like very, very driven individual, just sold a company fairly recently for a shit ton of money. I look at his labs for the past however many years. He has a average of 1,600 total test, and his free is like 35 to 40, and it's like his body is trying to make the SHBG to bind it up, but it's like it's not even able to do it because he just has such high production. It like overpowers his body, so he has a high total, like literally a guy on cycle almost, a high SHBG and a high free simultaneously, just because the sheer amount of the total test is too much for the SHBG to handle. So I had him get a pituitary, actually get imaging done to see actually what's going on. And I'm waiting to kind of get a confirmation that he's doesn't have something fucked up.
Yeah, pituitary adenoma. How is it LH and FSH levels?
Normal. Yeah.
Normal,
which is weird. So I told him he's super rich, so I told him to get a GnRH test too, and then also to get the imaging, and then hopefully he doesn't have something messed up. But I don't see any other reason why the things would be where they are.
You would see it on the growth hormone, the ACG, the LH, and the FSH. If there's something wrong, you know, like a pituitary adenoma or something like that, those would be the first.
Interestingly enough, his lipids are very bad too. So his LP little a through the roof.
Really?
Yeah. Which is another topic we should probably do, because it was on my categories list. We're just cranking these out. Just fucking.
Yeah. But have you guys noticed that people with high natural cholesterol tend to be like, I think there's some association between cholesterol synthesis and strength and power.
So we can take my wife as an example. My wife is always
another high cholesterol, high test. Yeah,
high test, high cholesterol. So her testosterone is like way out of range. like
Interesting.
50% over the reference range.
Well, then you're gonna have
Something
a
like this.
hopefully you have a
Or
boy and he's gonna be very
no, I
popular.
know it's going to have, you know, apparently her brother is doing well.
Yeah, he's gonna be
For what
popular
I've
with the
heard,
ladies.
you know, for a Thai man, you know, it's you know, the average length is still not up to par with the Western world. So,
Is
but
that why you moved to Thailand?
yeah,
Or I thought it was the
yeah,
height.
you
It's
get,
something
you
else.
get more length and girth, you know. It's you don't.
I went to
put-
Thunder's place. You went to Thailand.
Yeah, problem solved. No need
It's a
to
faster
you know, do any
solution
sort
for
of
sure.
experimentation on my
He's
penile
right.
tissue. Just move countries and you automatically gain an inch.
Which race do you guys notice from the blood work you see? Which race of people have the highest testosterone, or which area of the world do they tend to live in? Do you guys notice any? Because I don't have many African American people who have shown me their blood work.
No, me neither. I've seen it. It's all over the place, but it's usually like Southern Europeans, from what I've seen.
Italian and that kind of stuff, huh?
Italian, Spanish, Portugal, from you know, from memory, I would say that area, or Italian heritage, you know. And then again, their cholesterol is not too favorable, you know, during the
Interesting.
yeah.
I don't even keep track, to be honest. So I would speculate it would be. I don't know if African Americans just have more AR content or if they actually have higher endogenous testosterone levels too. I forget, but I know their EGFRs are like manually different on purpose to account for the increased muscle mass. So
That's from the creatinine, but you see with with the cystatin C that they're pretty much in the same range as everybody else.
Wait, is it for the increased muscle mass?
Yeah.
I because they have
there's like a push to get rid of it because it's racist.
Yeah,
is what some people think.
Yeah, it's a protective. But wait, that's not so. African Americans have a bunch of polymorphisms that really worsen their ability to get or increase their likelihood to get kidney disease. I thought that's
I don't think that people who make the ranges think that far ahead. I think that's like your research that you figured out though, because I've never seen
the ranges are based on averages, right? So the African American average is so much worse than the white average that they separated them out.
Yeah, if you Google it though, it says literally because of muscle mass content.
Wow. I didn't even.
But isn't it also because African Americans or Africans in general are more predispositioned to get type 1 or type 2 diabetes?
Could also be, yeah.
Just like the native Australians, the Aboriginals. I mean,
aren't they way more prone to prostate cancer too?
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult being an African American. Actually, your age of life expectancy is way lower. So many stresses in life are worse. That's very true. Just like it is for being a man versus a woman, also more likelihood of suicide and so on.
Only in the Western world.
So, yeah. By the way, are you guys both aware that sperm counts have declined by 30%?
Oh yeah. A lot of the guys in the HRT space constantly talk about how all the phytochemicals and everything it's leading to. I don't really know, to be honest, but I remember I did a video a while back on average testosterone levels back in like World War I or something. There was some study I found that showed the averages, and they weren't. I don't know. There's this theory that goes around that all of our great grandparents had like 2,000 nanogram per deciliter total test levels, and they just definitely didn't. No. But I would believe that the sperm counts are, and probably the test levels too, are declining because of lifestyle and perhaps environmental factors too. I just don't think it's as drastic as is implied by many people, where they think that every great grandpa was like a beast on cycle pretty much naturally.
This is just something that humans love to do. So in Judaic religions, Christianity and Islam, they think that older humans were like giants. Yeah. It's in all of the three religions.
Even though we're all taller and bigger than our great grandparents,
and our lifespan is way further. I mean.
No, we're not taller than the Paleolithic people. We're taller than the last 3,000 years.
Yeah.
The Paleolithic people were tall. They were like 6 feet tall in Europe 3,000 years ago.
Isn't that some Neanderthal genes?
It's probably because they were eating a high protein diet, and then when the Neolithic expansion came, everyone moved to like rice.
Yeah,
so it was so much shorter. Yeah, exactly. But okay, I think the final thing I wanted to mention, other than those, were free radical scavengers and immunomodulatory molecules. Now, these are not drugs, but like things like vitamin C, NAC. Those are free radical scavengers. Then immunomodulatory things are like EPA, moringan from moringa extract, garlic, those things. So I would use those extensively to lower the inflammatory stress on my body during a cycle, because your brain basically thinks you're at war when you're on a serious cycle.
Taurine would be protective of the testicles. I'm literally looking at my giant clusterfuck of supplements beside me right now.
Carnitine,
curcumin,
Yeah,
what
there are
else?
vitamin E.
But there are
Astragalus, citrus bergamot, melatonin.
So everything on the Gorilla Mind product list, basically.
Yeah,
Would you guys
eventually
have a baby aspirin? Would you guys recommend that? Because that's a practice a lot of people use.
So I don't know why you would be taking a baby aspirin if you've got your fish oil on track. So for people,
No, exactly. But I think that's a common thing done in
I think it's
bodybuilding.
left over from the ECA stack, which is pretty outdated. You know, the problem is with aspirin, even if it's baby aspirin, 81 milligrams per day, is the stomach ulcers and the thinning of the stomach lining.
That's true.
So the problem is with a high protein diet and oral steroids and a boatload of supplements that we're on, you want to keep your stomach lining as intact as possible. And I know guys that did an ECA stack that got ulcers in their stomach. So and does the ephedrine and the caffeine contribute? It could be. They're also probably on oral steroids, but I would not take baby aspirin or a proton pump inhibitor to mess with your stomach, because otherwise you're in this very long trajectory of 20 to 30 grams of glutamine per day. And it takes a long period of time to really heal your stomach and your stomach lining and the mucus, etc. Fix all the digestive issues that come with it. And oral steroids already mess with your digestion more than enough. So
for the audience to understand, the reason you take aspirin is to thin your blood, to lower the workload of your heart, and to lower the risk of getting a stroke. Yeah. So that's right, Derek. That's why you're thinking about it.
Yeah.
There's some conflictory research about whether long-term use of a baby aspirin is helpful for your cardiovascular health, which is what we're talking about. But we know 100% for sure that 4 grams of EPA in the Reduce It trial lowers cardiovascular mortality by 25%. And the EPA will thin the hell out of your blood. If anyone uses it to that degree, you'll cut yourself, you'll bleed like when you were a kid. And then
how much do you guys use? I use 5 grams a day right now.
Yeah, I use 6 usually.
I get about 6,000 milligrams of EPA and DHEA. So that either comes from fish oil supplements or salmon or chia seeds a little bit. I get 50 grams of omega-3 per day. But
so basically, Steve takes his fish oil with mercury. We take it without mercury. No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
Maybe that's why I'm getting so much cognitive decline.
There's some other stuff that I think I'll
got
definitely
the EPA in the closet here also to get the mercury and the heavy metals.
I'll probably forget some, and I don't think there's a possible way we're going to remember every health supplement we take, but like ubiquinol, I take vitamin K2. I take on top of, I take some magnesium bisglycinate through our sleep product. And then that's the majority of it. The rest I kind of hit through diet, and I can't think of anything else. And I'm definitely missing something, but I think that was pretty comprehensive. I don't know.
I would say magnesium bisglycinate, just a low dose with each meal, will help with insulin sensitivity and blood pressure management tremendously.
Yeah.
Really?
Tremendously, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Just 100 to 200 milligrams of magnesium bisglycinate or glycinate, which is the more bioavailable form.
Yes, it's the most bioavailable form.
Yeah, insulin sensitivity and blood pressure management is probably the best. So whenever you go on one of these compounds that really bumps up your blood pressure, like Trenbolone, for example, or Anadrol or check drops, mint, etc., a little bit of magnesium with each meal, ideally a little bit of potassium also from either.
I think literally everyone is like deficient in magnesium and potassium.
So that's a long list that could be a long list of supplements, because like I take 40, some of my clients take 40 or 50 different kinds of things. So
disgusting.
But those are like the least exotic ones though, probably, that are mainstream, I guess.
In terms of like you didn't mention, for example, zinc, which is almost impossible to.
Right. Yeah. If your diet, you can't get enough, then I take we have zinc bisglycinate in our sleep product too. So it's kind of just I hit it through that if I needed it, I guess, on top. But
I mean, it's really difficult to get enough zinc through a normal diet, to be honest with you. It's really difficult.
Yeah, most guys get about 26 milligrams per day, or the guys that I coach, it's usually around 20 to 30 milligrams of zinc from dietary sources, and then adding in like a general multivitamin, like whatever multivitamin they have, usually like 5 to 10 milligrams. So it's from dietary sources, maybe 10 to 15 milligrams.
But by the way, if they take that multivitamin with their food, that's gone. There's no zinc absorption.
Yeah, probably not that much. So it's probably just
most of them taking their food.
I track like all the micronutrients for all my clients, but the absorption, it highly depends on when you take these supplements and if you take them with fiber and everybody absorbs things differently. Like I have very high iron absorption, whether I take vitamin C or not. And then other people that follow the exact same freaking diet as me with vitamin C, they have very low serum iron concentrations. There's so many discrepancy in absorption rates amongst all individuals.
So I'll list my favorite free radical scavenging tools together, which are glycine, NAC, vitamin C, and then I also like alpha lipoic acid and taurine, but I take those two in a different time of the day. The reason why you'd use more than one free radical scavenger is that there are different kinds of free radicals, and there are different kinds of assays that test their potency at different kinds of free radicals, and they're all slightly different, which is why Derek has to produce a product in the future like that has a lot of free radicals and immunomodulatory compounds, so that you can significantly lower your C-reactive protein. And I bet you, Derek, that you can create a product that will reduce it in your own placebo-controlled studies if you want to do one, which would be amazing, because you could say this product actually lowers C-reactive protein. Because, for example, garlic does that in controlled studies. Some other molecules do. Very few. Curcumin doesn't, for example.
Curcumin does.
Not C-reactive protein significantly. I don't think so. Are you sure?
It does, yeah.
How much?
Especially if it's from the exogenous carrier oils.
Okay, interesting. But
which is another topic I wanted to do, but I feel like I'm run out of battery.
Yeah, we're running out of time, I think. But basically, those are my favorite of those. And then in terms of immunomodulatory action, you pick either sulforaphane or moringan, I think. Then garlic, curcumin. What other things are immunomodulatory in gene transcription? I think those are the main ones.
Maybe vitamin E to a certain extent, but of course.
We missed coca, for example. Coca, all of these kind of things that are like not nutritional goods and that are not free radical scavengers are usually immunomodulatory compounds that are hormetic stressors.
Phytochemicals within, all have a little bit of potential benefits.